That's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.
Hello and welcome to episode 58 of PvA Radio. I am one of your hosts, Luke Croft. Joining me as always, freelance gaming journalist Cody Mellocline. Cody, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. Also joining us today, he almost gets in a wreck every single time we're talking on the phone. It's Larry Hunt.
It's true. No one in Virginia can drive.
It's wild. He'll call me. We'll be talking. He'll be in the middle of a sentence. I'll be in the middle of a sentence, and he'll be like, "Oh gosh, somebody almost hit me." I'm like, every time.
Yep, every time.
And Larry and I talk on the phone a lot.
A lot.
More than any human being should talk on the more than any human being our age should talk on the phone.
But I think I finally solved this mystery, though, right? So I work with teenagers, and one of them recently had his driver's test. He explained the test to me, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, so they don't evaluate whether you can actually do anything. They just hand you a license."
Yeah, I didn't even have to take my class through the school. My parents paid for private lessons, and it was really just me driving around with the instructor so that she could run errands. She'd be like, "Can you run by CVS real quick?" And I'd be like, "Sure." I'm like, "We're in North Carolina. We're not allowed to drive here." She's like, "I got to pick something up from Eden." So yeah, but also maybe, Larry, what we got to remember is the lowest common denominator here, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's you.
It
on
is.
the phone.
It's true. But these are mostly situations where I'm driving on the main. Somebody at a stop sign decides that the stop sign doesn't apply to them. So I don't feel like I'm at fault there.
Sure. All right.
This all sounds normal to me.
I call myself an idiot when I mess up. I'm an equal opportunity.
In Massachusetts, they actually, in the driver's test, you actually have to flip off a certain amount of people before you can pass.
I don't not believe you. All right, guys, this is PvA Radio. We get together each and every week over here on twitch.tv/PvA Radio, 9:30. Jesus Christ. At 9:30 p.m. Eastern time, Wednesday nights, each of us brings one of the biggest gaming news stories of the week to the table. Then we have an in-depth discussion about it. Consider it your collaborative audio feature article, or your CAFA, if you will. And Larry, what do we want people to do with that?
You want to, next time someone cuts you off in traffic, you want to just spray paint it on the side of their car. And also, you want to spam that emote in the chat.
You're going to have to run them off the road first, because if they cut you off, they're clearly in motion.
Or follow them home.
As you do.
Oh, man. If you can't catch these shenanigans live, you can see us the very next day over on youtube.com, where we break it out topic by topic, or you can listen to us on podcast services everywhere, including Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and Luminary, where we put our podcast right alongside Conan O'Brien's, the visionary of all things podcasting. Nobody thought to record anything in an audio medium until Conan O'Brien did it.
How many weeks are we going to make this joke?
It's a part of us now, man. So
on Conan's podcast, he had a great.
You listened to it?
I listened to the Will Ferrell episode. I love Will Ferrell. And I really like Conan O'Brien. But he had a great discussion about humor and how you make the joke till it's not funny anymore, but then you keep making it till it becomes funny.
Yeah.
Which you can also learn on Luke Croft's.
I was about to say, how revolutionary. You can also learn about this on my 12 Laserdisc comedy tutorial set, where we also talk about the concept of comedic dominance. Right? What?
You have to explain comedic dominance just briefly.
All right, briefly. Comedic dominance is the idea that there are multiple people always vying to be the funniest person in a group. The way that you establish comedic dominance is by making everybody in the group laugh, but identifying the other person who's trying really hard to get everybody to laugh and don't laugh at anything that person says. It's going to throw them off their game. They're going to spend the rest of the evening trying to get you to laugh. Evan Deneve did it, made a real ass out of himself. All right?
Man, you're a great guest at parties.
So, comedic dominance. You can learn about it. That's the first 3 discs of the Luke Croft Comedic Lessons Laserdisc set. All right? Let's move on. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping here at the top.
Killed Larry.
He's dead. He's gone. It's just me and you now, Cody. A little bit of housekeeping. It is still September, which is... for the month of September, I think it's sponsored by Subway as well, oddly enough. Twitch is allowing people to subscribe. I think it is. I'm not making this shit up, Larry. Don't laugh.
No, it makes sense. It makes too much sense.
So rather than $5 footlongs, you can get $2.50 subs if you're a first-time subsubscriber to a channel. And the way that you do...
6-inch or footlongs?
What?
6-inch or footlong subs for $2.50.
I guess by way of math, it would be a 6-inch. So, you get a 6-inch hoagie if you subscribe over here. So,
this is my favorite show.
Anyway, the button's up here. Damn it! No, it's not. It's up. No, it's here. It's up here. Click the button up here. You get it for half off. The beautiful thing is, we get all of the same money we normally would. Twitch doesn't, still take half of it like they always do, like they're the fucking U.S. government or something. All right,
yeah, Twitch.
That's all the housekeeping I got. Let's move on to get this week started like we get every week started. Cody, why don't you bring us to ground here and give us some critical analysis of the games you've been playing this week?
Some critical analysis. All right. I haven't been playing too much new. Still gaming on that Siege. Starting to get a little bit better, starting to dunk on some fools.
Going pro?
Yeah, that's my goal, right? But I am nearing the end of Control. Literally, the only reason I'm not playing it right now is because we're doing this podcast. I guess if I was a true gamer, I would be playing it right now. But yeah. I'm not.
On the hardest difficulty.
Yes.
There's no difficulty settings in that game, I don't believe. Is there?
I don't think so. I wasn't given an option at the beginning.
Yeah.
But I think I still love this game. Some of its frustrations and some of kind of the baffling design decisions have sort of come to the surface the longer I've played it. Like, for some reason, they've taken the Dark Souls approach to checkpointing, and like the checkpoints are few and far between. There's literally no reason why this should be the case.
So just in the sense of like the checkpoints being spread out, or when you go to a checkpoint, the enemies you've killed come back. No,
there are respawn patterns in area to area. It's more so the distance between the checkpoints, and there's no checkpointing in between them, as in most kind of like narrative based games, which is kind of annoying. Especially when some of the bosses later in the game get pretty difficult, and so to have to do what is normally, I guess, in a From Software game, a boss run, in this game is just running down like 2 hallways with no enemies in it. There's no point to it. So that, and kind of the bosses have been, some of them have been interesting, some of them have just been kind of frustrating. Basically just throwing a more powerful version of an enemy you've already fought, in addition to like cramming more enemies at you. Not the most creative boss design in the world. But some stuff late in the game has been absolutely awesome. I think I tweeted about it either today or yesterday. There's a section called the Ashtray Maze that is one of the most creative levels in a game I've played in a long time. And it's more of a sequence, I guess, than a level, because it's very linear and a very curated experience. But they pull a musical cue, and the way the level unfolds in concert with the music is absolutely brilliant. And it's one of those things where I thought it was really dumb when it started. And then about 30 seconds after that, I'm like, no, this is absolutely brilliant.
Kind of like this podcast.
Exactly. Kind of like this podcast.
Oh, I thought it was the opposite.
This is brilliant. This is garbage. Yeah.
What have I gotten myself into? The music doesn't sync up at all.
But yeah, Control I'm still really vibing with, and I got to a weird, like, the credits supposedly ran and then they stopped running. And then,
that seems very Kojima.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I can see why Kojima has been wearing Control shirts all over the place. He's been marketing his game. There's a lot of.
What if Death Stranding is just Control?
Well, this game has already made very defined connections to other Remedy games, so it'd be cool if they started just pulling in other publishers' games
without permission.
All they need is Kojima's sign off, and I'm sure he would give it to them.
We control the IP. That's the whole point of the name.
Exactly. But yeah, this game just continues to surprise me, and it has two of my favorite characters in a long time. There's a scientist named Dr. Darling who is not actually in the game. You see presentations of him, and all the presentations are live action, so it's like an actual actor performing them. And he's great. Kind of chronicling his arc through these like staff presentations is actually one of the more emotional kind of through lines of the game. And then there's a janitor named Ati, who it may or may not be some sort of trans-dimensional being.
See, that's where this diverges from Kojima, because if this was a Kojima game, that janitor would have been called like Steve Broomman or something.
Broomhead, yes. And he's portrayed, so for context, Remedy is a Finnish company, and the janitor is played by a Finnish actor who you can tell English is not his primary language. And I think it's on purpose. It's supposed to be disorienting. And he's the first person you meet, and literally nothing he says makes any sense. And by the end of the game, I think more of it makes sense, but still, like, he's clearly on some other plane of existence entirely. He's a really cool character. But I'm just like this. I am so in love with this game still, despite its flaws, and it does have flaws. The performance, they sent out, I think they released a patch within the last few days that definitely improved performance. Still dips below 30 occasionally, and this is on consoles. But the performance is better. Apparently PS4 is the worst performance of any of the releases. So I'm playing on Xbox, so I can't speak to that. But yeah, still digging Control. And then I guess I wasn't on the show last week, but I did beat Sekiro.
Congratulations.
Oh. On the easiest difficulty, though.
Yes. Get good difficulty. And I'm really happy about that. I got a cool ending, but I don't think I got the best ending. Apparently, I got the true ending, but the most emotionally, I went and rewatched. I watched all the endings on YouTube after that. But the most emotionally resonant one is not the true ending, and it's basically the true ending because I think it's basically what will lead into a sequel. It's pretty definitive about that. But the final boss was sick, brutal as hell. It took me about 3 days to 3 or 4 days, kind of on and off, to beat him. But I love that game. It's I think I've never been a huge Dark Souls person, but it is slightly below Bloodborne in terms of my favorite games from From Software.
How pissed is everyone going to be when we get Sekiro 2 before we get Bloodborne 2?
I think people like Sekiro. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure people will be pissed. It'll be Sekiro Shadows Die Thrice, probably. I'm really hoping they go with that.
All right, Larry, what have you been playing?
Still playing a lot of Apex. I had probably my favorite play in that game. We dropped with a team. Both my teammates got knocked, and I beat the other two people to death with my fists. One of them had a gun. It was beautiful. I love that game, even if I'm disappointed in who runs it. Played some Overwatch and still loving that. I finally took the time to watch some videos and get familiar with the current meta. I'm glad I did that because I was tearing stuff up with Reaper the other night.
Mm-hmm.
Reaper is so strong right now. Unfair strong, overpowered strong. And we need to climb as high as we can before they nerf him.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm going to get a little in the weeds briefly, but he can't take damage while he's shadow stepping anymore. So you can just teleport in the middle of a team and start wrecking stuff.
Yeah.
It's not even fair. I love it. And then the other game I played, me and my wife have been continuing our playthrough of The Man of Medan. And I'm still enjoying the game. Once you get on the ship, it gets super creepy. The setup for that game is slow and long, but once you get there, I found it real unsettling. It's hit me with all kinds of jump scares, which I'm real susceptible to, and my wife is not. I wish that she would join me to stream, but she's not interested. Because it's just fun to watch me get terrified while my wife looks at me like I'm an idiot. It's great. And I'm sorry you can't have that experience. But as we've gotten to this point in the game, the issues with the textures popping in have become a bigger problem. And they really ruin the immersion. When everything fades out for a second, you got to wait for it to come back. It just it yanks you out of the moment. And it tends to happen in intense moments where there's a lot of action going on, which makes it a bigger problem. And I have another criticism of the game. I don't know if it's just luck so far or if I'm right in this, but the quick time events. My wife has a lot of strong qualities, but quick decision making is not one of them. And so she fails almost every button press, and it has not killed any character yet. And I'm not exaggerating. She's probably failed 90% of the button presses, and it in the grand scheme of things does not change the outcome of the story. And for me, it's kind of like, why put them in there if you're just going to like save the character anyway? Like, just take those out and make it about making decisions. So, a couple of criticisms there, but I'm enjoying the game. I'm enjoying the story, and I'm still having a blast with it. And it gets really spooky. If you need a spooky game, pick that up.
Awesome. Been playing Overwatch with I've only really played Overwatch one night with you. I haven't been playing a whole lot lately, except I've been playing Madden. So let's go to the tales from why Madden is a huge flaming pile of shit. So I'm playing in a playoff game in a career mode. I finally figured out how you can play as a defender without being cut from the team. You just have to start after the preseason in order to remain on the team. So I'm in a playoff game. I'm up by 7. The other team has the ball. They're about to kick a field goal. They're on like the, 40-yard line. The game glitches out when the ball gets snapped. It never gets to the holder. Instead, the center continues to hold it in his stance, and the play is not whistled dead. I can't tackle him, and he's inching ever forward at a very, very slow rate. There's about 6.5 minutes left in the third quarter or something like that. The play lasts for the entire 6.5 minutes until he finally crosses the goal line and scores a touchdown, tying the game up. Oh, man. I was like, this game, it's going to be the death of me because I want to play it, but it's so fucking bad. So, just been playing more Madden. I started playing a little bit of 2K. Don't really have any thoughts on that as of right now because I haven't played a ton of it. I imagine I'll get more into that as the NBA season gets closer. I did want to bring up. Go ahead.
I believe I saw today that 2K is now like the record for lowest reviewed game on Steam.
And it makes sense.
Is it user?
I think it was
review?
user. Yeah.
Well,
I've heard there's some pretty significant issues.
Yeah, there's a lot of real bad server issues, just continuing issues with microtransactions and other things as well. So that is a franchise that from a core gameplay standpoint has so many high points. One of the single best simulation experiences in terms of like simulating a broadcast experience when you're playing the game. The commentary in that game is still mind blowing to me. How well crafted it is. But it is just one of those games that suffers from the fact that they can't get out of their own way with these fucking monetization models that are just disastrous. This is the same game that had the slot machines, and and Peggy was like, we don't really see how this is teaching people how to gamble.
And I forget which tournament, but there was a tournament that decided not to use this game because of the gambling side of it. I need to start saving these articles so I look like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's frustrating as a guy who, and it's the same thing with Madden. I mean, Madden is so focused on the the modes that allow them to monetize post launch that the modes that I grew up playing and loving suffer as a result of it. And it becomes less about the actual gameplay of it because it's all results driven. It's about, did you win or did you lose? And it doesn't matter how you got there, because if you lose, you really want to improve your team. And if you win, you get to improve your team. So, I do want to talk about something cool, though. I did not play this, but my wife did. She watched the Nintendo Direct with me a couple weeks ago and got really excited about the SNES games coming to Switch Online. And so she's been playing through like the old Zelda games, the old Kirby games, and she's just been really pumped about it. My wife's not a big gamer. She likes to play the Kirby games. She'll play Smash Brothers every now and again, but like over the last week, she's just been like randomly standing up, undocking the Switch and playing for like 45 minutes or so. And so that's just really cool to see. I'm not big on retro gaming myself, but she is. Those are the games she grew up with, and she hates anything 3D. Anything where she has to control the camera, she's out. So she loves all these retro games coming back.
That's great.
Before we jump into our topics, since Cody is here this week, I did want to bring this up again. We've been talking about this both on the PvA Nightly Rundown and over here on the show as well. But we had a discussion in our Discord a couple weeks ago. Oh man, sorry for our audio listeners. I did not change our sub alert, so you get to hear this song. Beal for real with the subscription for September. Greatly appreciated, my dude. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill.
I'm going to go through and change that here in just a second, but I do want to mention this. We talked on our Discord a couple weeks ago. Cody actually brought this up about there were some stories regarding plagiarism in the true crime podcasting world that it kind of expanded out into a conversation across a bunch of different genres of podcasts as well.
It's amazing how rampant that got in the short time since Conan invented podcasting. Sorry.
I love it, dude. But we got to talking, and we use a lot of other people's work on this show to at least build the foundation for the topics that we're talking about. Obviously nobody would pay to publish any of the thoughts we're spouting after we move on from the articles, but but to get into the topics, we do use other people's work, and we try to be really good in the audio version of it, of saying, hey, we've taken this from a story that was published on this site written by this individual. And then we try to be really good about quoting when we're quoting people who were in the story. We want to go a step further, though, and directly link to the articles that are being used. And so for the PvA Nightly Rundown, what we've been doing is we've just been linking out to my running list of show notes because it's got every single link on there. What we're going to do for PvA Radio is we're going to just put all of the links to the articles we're using in the description of the episode on YouTube and on podcast services. I need to set up a command. I have not done this yet, where you can just type in ! show notes and be taken to the document we're working off of if you're watching over on Twitch, just so that you can, click on the articles there as well. But we just want to make sure we're upfront about, and we give credit to the people who we're using. Cody, do you have anything else you wanted to say?
I think you nailed it. I think it's a question of ethics. And as someone who does do original reporting and creates original work regularly, I think it's always great to give props to people who are out there doing a lot of good work. And it's we're creators, they're creators. It's always just good to be able to spotlight the people who are doing this stuff. It's an ethical thing. I think it's also just something we should be doing more of in general. I think we should know the people who are writing the words that we read every day.
Yeah, definitely. All right, cool. Well, let's jump into our show. Cody, I believe you are starting us off. What is the topic that you've brought to the table for us this week?
Yeah. I'm going to talk a little bit about Apple Arcade, which is launching officially tomorrow, but has had a beta, I think, for the last week or so. So last week, Apple announced the price release date and some of its launch lineup, and this is courtesy of I mean, a lot of outlets reported this, but this is courtesy of Charlie Hall over at Polygon. And so all of these details are sourced there. But Apple announced that the service, which is essentially it's a premium service, storefront for games, streaming service that spans iOS, Mac, and Apple TV. It'll cost $4.99 per month for the whole family. It launches September 19th, which, as of the recording and streaming of this, is tomorrow, Thursday. And the claim was that they spotlighted at the announcement, they spotlighted 3 games. They spotlighted Konami's Super Frogger. They spotlighted Capcom's Shinsekai Into the Depths, and they spotlighted, I believe, Sayonara Wild Hearts, which is awesome. I think it looks like a great game. It's from Annapurna Interactive. And they also said that they would announce the launch lineup a little bit closer to the release, and they have done that. A follow-up piece by I believe it was Russ Frischstick over at Polygon cited a Mac rumors article, which I have up right here, by Julie Clover. And Julie Clover this is awesome. She kind of went through all of the titles that are available in the beta for Apple Arcade, which is over 50 games, and kind of created a comprehensive list of all of them. And there are actually some pretty great titles on there. There's stuff from Ubisoft, there's stuff from Lego, obviously Devolver Digital, and the publishers and developers I mentioned before. And it's over 50 games. Also key to this is as a premium service, Apple Arcade will not feature ads or in-app purchases for any of the games that go on the platform. And I think that's probably one of the most key parts to Apple's service, and something I'm sure we'll be talking about, because I think we've been talking at length, and Larry has been kind of spearheading this conversation around mobile gaming. How much of an absolute, and I believe the technical term is trash heap of an environment mobile gaming is right now, complete with rampant microtransaction models, absolutely predatory practices. And so I think Apple is attempting to, in some ways, respond to that with this service. But I think, just for transparency, before we talk about this, I know I have an iPhone, and I know, Luke, you have an iPhone, correct?
Yeah, boy.
Larry, do you have an iPhone?
Hell no.
Google owns my soul, my pal.
That is a no. Just curious, because I think it's good to get that out of the way first, because I do want to talk about first who we think this service is for. Obviously, other than Mac, Apple TV users, people in the Apple army. Who is this for, and who do you think this will benefit the most, I guess?
I honestly think this service is basically for everybody. I mean, the price point is so competitive, and the first month is free, so you can sign up and just try it. Everybody loves it. Look, almost everybody loves some kind of game, you know? There's probably something on this list that's going to appeal to you, and sub for a month for free, and then realize the at least volume of games that you're being given with this service. I imagine there's going to be a pretty high retention rate for this. Not to mention that it's just a fucking disaster to try to get into your settings and figure out where your recurring subscriptions are on your iPhone to cancel it. But $5, I mean, look, I'm gonna sign up for this and probably just keep it, no doubt. And I'm not a huge phone gamer, except for me being so addicted to Gears Pop that I forced myself to delete it in order to reclaim some productivity in my life. But $5 for me to just be able to like jump in, jump out of games, I don't know. I think that's a steal.
Yeah, I think it's for everybody as well. And I just think the people who are open to playing games in recent years, that demographic has just expanded so much. I think Fortnite did a lot for that. Just among youth group kids that I work with, I noticed kids playing that game who were not into games prior to that. And a lot of them were playing it on they were playing that, or there was a PUBG knockoff that was popular with a lot of my kids on mobile, and a lot of them are like they're packing it around playing it on their phones. So I think this is a great time to try something like this out. I think if people are looking for distraction, looking for games on their phones, it's so hard to find good ones right now. So yeah, I think there's definitely a big audience for this.
Yeah, I also think the $5.99, or not the $5.99, the $4.99 price model for the whole family is key to, I think, what they're going for. This is a great option for parents if they're afraid of predatory practices for their kids, which is all over the place in most mobile gaming. It's essentially, I mean, it is a streaming service in essence. Just it's highly curated. It's highly focused on quality, although there is quantity as well. I agree. I think this is for anybody who's remotely interested in games. It'll certainly bring in a lot of people who do play phone games. It'll bring in a lot of people who, like myself, wouldn't ordinarily, because I think the fact that I can get it on my phone and my Mac is great. And all of these games obviously will run on Mac and not put too much strain. Yeah, I think it's great for gamers. I think it's great for, hopefully, I believe it will be great for developers, especially premium mobile developers who can't really compete when everybody's racing for the bottom on the normal mobile market. I don't see why someone like Annapurna Interactive would not go on this. They who has like a pedigree of great mobile titles they don't kind of have a monetization model. They're more straightforward, linear, and single player, narrative driven. It seems like kind of a win-win for a lot of people.
Well, it's almost a forcing of the hand too. I mean, for those people, because you think about the price point of a lot of these like pay once single player mobile experiences, you're talking $2.99, $3.99, $4.99. So if you're being approached by Apple saying, "Hey, come onto this service," it's like, well, shit, why wouldn't I? Because you get all of these games for this price per month that you would pay one time just to be able to play my game that is only going to last a few hours at most, probably.
And for the most part, mobile gamers have shown such a hesitancy to actually outright purchase games. That's why these predatory monetization practices have flourished, because so few people will buy a game. But we're at this point in our culture where we're used to paying for a streaming service at this point. We're conditioned, we're ready for it, it makes sense. It's low risk. I've got 50 games to try out, and I'm bound to like one of them. So yeah, I think this is great.
Yeah. Do you think that our familiarity and willingness to pay for streaming services overpowers or kind of counteracts most people's lack of willingness to pay for games on their phone?
Well, you tell me, hey, pay $4.99 to get 80 of literally anything, I'm probably going to do it.
Yeah.
So I think that overpowers it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think there is, especially on mobile, there's a mentality that we don't want to pay for stuff. And obviously Apple is working counter to that, although you're paying for a service, you're not paying for the games, which I think is key.
And it's not surprising to me that Apple's the one doing this.
Yeah, Google's
because-
also exploring an option to keep that in mind.
Yeah, but the music market hit this point years ago. You know, like so many people weren't paying for music anymore because they could just pirate it, and Apple came in and offered a simple solution, like a simple way to pay and get music, and boom, it took off. So this just makes sense in so many ways.
It does. Apple's kind of doing what they've always done, which is, I guess, kind of streamlining things in a lot of ways. I am curious, and I guess the heft of this discussion, I want to talk about what Apple Arcade means at large for the mobile games market. We've sort of touched on this. The current state of the mobile games market is pretty atrocious in a lot of ways. Do you see this as, obviously they're not covering every single person with a phone here. A lot of people obviously have iPhones, but there are people like Larry and many of my friends who are not part of the Apple army. And Google is working on a solution for people who have Google phones. But what kind of impact do you guys think this will have on the mobile games market? Obviously, I think there will still be those developers that are racing to the bottom. And I think that market will certainly still exist. But I think having this as an option for a lot of developers is super enticing, and for a lot of people in general is super enticing.
Yeah, and I think it incentivizes developers to create games of quality that catch the eye of the curators from this service, to hopefully have them come and say, hey, we want your game to be a part of it. I mean, you just look at some of the stories coming out of engagement from Xbox Game Pass for some smaller games, and there's a lot of studios coming out that are saying, like, we didn't even realize how many people would play our game just because we're a part of Xbox Game Pass. I imagine that same truth is going to translate over to a service like this on mobile, where people who would regularly expect X amount are going to get X amount to the whatever power because they're just a part of this service. And and I don't know how payment works from Apple to the developers, if it's based off of like, hey, here's an initial lump sum and then you get X amount per engagement. But I imagine this is going to be a kind of prize at the end of the run for a lot of games, and that's the goal that a lot of mobile developers are going to be running towards, is can we create a game that's good enough to be on this platform? And I think that's going to change it. Obviously, we're still going to get people who are like, all right, log in for the next 7 days for all your rewards and flashing lights and slot machines and shit. But I'm hoping that we get to see more, not just more quality, because there are quality mobile experiences that exist already, but more eyes on quality mobile experiences to legitimize that more as a platform than it probably has been in the past.
Yeah, I think that the quality is going to be the biggest impact on the mobile games market. This provides an avenue by which you could have somewhat reliable monetization of a game. It's currently risky to release a game and expect to be paid for it outright, and that's why so many of these games have these practices. But when you create that environment where I can put a game out there, I can expect to get paid for it, you eliminate those practices, and then the developers can spend more time focusing on what makes a good game and less time trying to hook whales. Now, the broader mobile market is still going to be a dumpster fire. And I expect that we'll still continue to see a lot of like big name franchises enter the mobile gaming space in the other way, because it's a quick way to make money. Like, that's for most of this era of EA owning the licensing to Star Wars. That's what they've used. It's, let's just pump some mobile games out to monetize them. So I expect to see a lot of that kind of stuff. But this is the first time that I think I've ever been optimistic that we might see some really cool original experiences popping up on mobile games markets in any kind of number.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see some developers and some of the first developers to start to dip their toes into this now that there is kind of a certain amount of quality control, or there's a certain amount of curation that comes with it. I think it's possible to compare it to to Netflix in a way, in that I think more and more big name directors are seeing the viability of what putting your movie on Netflix actually means. Like Martin Scorsese is literally releasing a Netflix movie this year. Alfonso Cuarón released one last year. You're seeing a lot of, because it just gets it out in front of a lot of people, and you're not worried about, oh, if it doesn't hit this number, then it's kind of considered a failure. And I think, especially for someone like I mentioned, Annapurna Interactive and some other developers, including that game company who released a mobile game, and I haven't heard head nor tail of it since it came out. I actually didn't even know it came out. I went to look up what they were up to the other day on Wikipedia, and I saw that they had released a game, and I had no idea. And I think existing on a more curated service, where I hope they're not just dumping 50 games every week. That is my one worry. I worry about exposure, and I worry about kind of giving games their due, but it sounds like they're going to be meeting it out more regularly and more kind of selectively in the ensuing months. I think it's a perfect storm to create some really quality interest, like as you said, Larry, quality interesting mobile experiences, because the risk is taken out of it a little bit. I think it'll obviously attract people with a lot more development experience and a lot more money, but I think it would, regardless of whose name was on the platform. I think that's kind of the idea behind it. I don't want to see 50 shitty mobile games on the market every week. I want to see 10 quality experiences from developers I either know or don't know yet, but will be introduced to.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what they're promising.
On that side of it, it gives me hope that, so the mobile space has been a space that can kind of be an entry point for someone that wants to get into game design but lacks the skills to really enter the industry. Like it's an easy entry point. It seems to be. You see people with like no other experience just popping up and putting their, at least on the Android store. I see a lot of like people that they apparently just they learned how to code. They had a game idea and some of those games are really cool. When I think about the really egregious predatory games, they're almost universally a big name franchise capitalizing on monetizing the gaming space. And I think that those games wind up crowding out some actually cool games because the name recognition just carries the day. And so this may also wind up elevating some of those designers who can pitch to Apple, hey, I've got this game, and if Apple gives them a shot and reviews it, they may be like, all right, this is actually really cool. This fits in well. And so it may, like, the dumpster fire will continue to be the dumpster fire, but you may pull some of the gems out of the dumpster fire that are currently being overlooked because of just the state of the market.
I'm interested to see how Apple goes about structuring the game section of their app store.
Yeah.
Following the launch of this, like, are they going to highlight games that are a part of the service? And, you've got like your paid and your free category. Is it going to be a separate category that includes games that are included in Apple Arcade, or are they going to try to mix that in? Is this going to push down some of the more like shitty quality free to play stuff that comes up? Because at the end of the day, Apple still makes an assload of money from those free to play games, because they get a cut of every dollar that's spent with in-app purchases and things like that. So it doesn't incentivize them in any way to push those things down at all. But I think there's got to be a natural, something's going to have to lose visibility within this when this launches. And I'm just curious to see how Apple walks that tightrope.
Yeah, I'm also curious to see who starts to populate the Apple Arcade. I do sort of worry that it might be focused on bigger names over kind of smaller names we haven't heard of. I don't know what the process will be for how they attract talent, how they seek talent, how people pitch to them. I can't speak to that. I would be interested to hear about that. And I would be interested to hear how they pay developers as well. I'm sure we'll hear about that in the very near future. I have a lot of hopes for what this service could do to a market that I'm otherwise not interested in, but am starting to become interested in just as I travel more and more.
Well, I'm going to check it out tomorrow when it launches.
Yeah, let me know how it is.
And I'll report back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.
I don't think I'm going to check it out.
Larry's going to pick up an iPhone right now. All right. Speaking of Larry, it is your topic time. What are you bringing to the table for us this week?
My topic comes from an article on TechCrunch.com. The article is Meet VENN, the company hoping to build MTV for the gaming generation, by Jonathan Schreiber. And just to give you a quick rundown of the story, two guys, Ariel Horn, and this is from the article, for the creators of VENN, who include Ariel Horn, a 4-time Emmy-winning producer who brought the commercial storytelling from his network days working on Olympics broadcasts for NBC, a division of Comcast, to the esports phenomenons of Riot Games and Blizzard Entertainment, and Ben Kusin, a former global director of new media at Vivendi Games. These two guys are creating a gaming network called VENN, as in Venn diagram, and it stands for Video Entertainment News Network. But there's a double meaning. Do you catch the double entendre? They also intend to make the network sort of a Venn diagram of video games, music, fashion, and entertainment. And so that's what's going on there. They hope that this will be a network that wields the same culture shaping influence that MTV once wielded,
and continues to.
But instead of music as the focus, it's gaming as the focus. And the article contains a quote from Kusin, quote, "We will be distributed on Twitch, on YouTube, and on Pluto, Hulu, and Roku, anywhere and everywhere that our customers are consuming content," end quote. So, I mean, that's the idea. They're creating a gaming central network. My understanding is that it's going to function like a live TV network, but you're going to be able to watch it on all these different avenues where you're used to streaming content. And I did not expect to see something like this. This story really took me off guard. So what are your thoughts on this? Is this something that the market is primed for? Is this like, now's the time, we need a gaming network channel, or do you think this is a mistaken step backwards to an old, out of date model?
I think there's a nostalgic part of me who has wanted something like this for some time. Growing up as a sports fan, especially, and having ESPN be such a staple in my life. 24/7 sports all the time. They're either talking about sports or showing sports. Like my dad used to just get mad at me all the time because I would always come home from school and like the TV immediately went on ESPN. So I grew up with this like round the clock coverage of a subculture that I was very much a part of and into. And so I like this as a concept, I guess. But then when you start to think about the practicality of it, when you start to think about where we are as a society in terms of the way that we digest media, and also when you think about the way that especially esports is structured in terms of a lot of the streaming deals that exist already, I just don't understand the function and the place that something like VENN would have. And I've got some other concerns about a 24/7 video game news cycle, but we'll get to that here in a minute, I assume. But like it in premise, doubt it will work in any kind of meaningful, practical way.
Parts of this are appealing. I'm still kind of unclear what it is, because they use a lot of like very high level tech world jargon. Like they're very idealistic about what this is. So I'm not clear if it seems like they want to do everything. So streaming esports, streaming exclusive content from streamers, content creators, They didn't really make mention of news, although news is in the title of their network.
Yeah.
Which is sort of concerning to me. That's the area I would be most interested
Well,
in.
MTV is still music television, and they don't have any music, so I guess that's par for the course.
Yeah, but that took a while to develop. This is the
Yeah.
start of their network. That's
It's-
the area. I mean, personally, that's the area I'm most interested in for obvious reasons. I do think it's interesting, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, that the rest of the entertainment world seems to be decentralizing away from the cable broadcast model, although they are recreating it in their own. Like every station now is going to have its own streaming service. It's not going to be part of a cable package. Whereas they seem to be going in the opposite direction and taking a very decentralized form of entertainment and attempting to centralize it.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not people are willing to kind of watch a more mediated, professional, like, for lack of a better word, corporate version of like kind of what they're used to, is something that I'm a little bit unsure about.
Yeah. So unfortunately for our discussion, we're not going to have a whole lot of discussion on this, because I'm in the exact same boat. For me, this is like super appealing to me in terms of the nostalgia. I loved Tech TV back in the day. I loved G4, and I was sad when those things closed down, although guilty of helping them close down because I hadn't watched them in years. But as far as where the market's at, just, you're right, Cody. Everyone else is moving this, and it seems odd to step toward. Everyone wants to watch what they want from a plethora of options on demand, and in some ways, streaming, the Twitch streaming model is antithetical to that. You either catch the person when they're streaming or you don't, and you can go back and watch the VODs, but the aim of most people is to watch it live, and I think that's really appealing to people. But when you put that into a network channel model and cram it into a weird schedule, like I'm just picturing like Catch Ninja Tuesdays at 8 p.m.
Yeah,
it's not quite the same thing. And they talk a lot about in the article about increasing the production value of these kinds of things, and that's appealing to me. But I also think that we talk about production value on our show. It matters in streaming for sure, but I don't know how much you can increase it before you start to lose the feel of the personal connection that I think a lot of people in streaming.
Yeah, there is very much so like streaming is about finding being a viewer of streams is about finding the corner of the internet that you want to be a part of in the community that you want to be a part of. Like, I'm sure there's overlap in the audiences of a lot of bigger streamers that I'm sure VENN would want to go after, but there's also probably a lot of exclusivity between them, where there's people who watch Ninja that never watch Dr. Just tossing out names of big streamers here, but and it's all because like you find the community you want to be a part of and you stick in that community. Like, you don't see a lot of people who are like, man, I've got 25 streamers that I really like to watch. Like, it's just not the way the platform works. So I also am worried because there's a lot of things in the esports world I would love to see. I would love to see an organization that like gets highlight rights to some of these leagues and can start to put together like some highlight shows, like Sports Center or something like that for the esports world. And so from the esports side of this, I think it's cool because it's starting to, something centralized like this for esports can disconnect it from, hey, let's watch this on ESPN, and like then you're kind of shoehorning yourself into that conversation about are esports sports, which is not a place that we really need to be fighting battles. But I don't see a company like this at any point in time soon being able to capture any kind of live streaming rights to those kinds of esports. The other thing I get concerned with is, and this isn't just with VENN, because honestly, I don't know if this is exactly going to be their approach, but it's something kind of at large in a lot of esports coverage is we've blended this idea of esports and other like popular streamers, because a lot of popular streamers are really good at these games and playing them very competitively. I think of an outlet like Dexerto, who I read a lot of esports news from, but they also do a lot of like just streaming news coverage. Like, check out what so-and-so did on their stream today. And it's like, I don't really care about that shit. And I think a lot of times like this kind of like homebrew production value next to these really professional setups that a lot of esports are trying to put forward, I think clash in a lot of ways. And I don't understand why we as a subculture try to marry those two things so closely together.
Yeah. Now, they've left the scope of this thing pretty broad, and that leaves them a lot of room for programming. But that also leaves us, like you said, Cody, in a place of not really knowing what we're getting, because it's gaming, it's entertainment, it's fashion, it's news. And in a lot of ways, it almost sounds like they're trying to jump to MTV after MTV lost its focus.
Yeah. And when you start thinking about like a program schedule, you start thinking about like, okay, well, we cover esports, video game news, this, that, the other. That means you're going to have programs for each of those things, which means if I only care about one of those, I have to know I've got to tune in at 7:30 to see the show that talks about the thing that I care about. The great thing about ESPN is you care about sports, you turn on ESPN, guess what they're probably talking about? At least sports adjacent stuff. That's a good point, Larry. Like, it seems a way out of focus from the start.
Yeah. There's a fun buzzword right now, mission drift. And in a lot of ways, that's what MTV had to do, just as the culture changed. Like, kids weren't consuming music in that way anymore. But it was still a drift, and I think it, in a lot of ways, like, it has led to where they're at now. It's the same thing, History Channel. I'm going to watch UFO stories and monster hunters if I tune into the History Channel. So I'm not optimistic about this model in the current landscape. But we'll see what happens.
I do think a focused version of this could work. Like, I think for a lot of people, like what you were saying, Luke, I think for a lot of people, the esports focused version of this could be potentially very exciting. There are obviously complications that come with that. And I think we've bandied around G4 as kind of a point of comparison because it's probably the best point of comparison. But their focus was, they were news focused. They were kind of like pop culture, like gaming as a cultural phenomenon focused. And I think the gaming world has changed a lot since the days of G4.
Yeah.
They, towards the beginning of this story, I think there's a very interesting point of comparison, where the author, Jonathan Schreiber, kind of points out where music, and particularly music videos, was once the genre-spanning language for a generation. The two entrepreneurs, Kusin and Horn, see gaming culture as the touchstone for a new audience. And I do think that's right in a way, but I also think the way people engage with it and what part of it they engage with it varies so much. I think, again, I go back to gaming is something that unites a lot of people. But I think it's such a decentralized form of entertainment because it's developed that way. And especially streaming is such a decentralized form of entertainment because that's by nature what it is. I mean, you go through certain hubs, but who you're watching, who you're entertained by is inevitably different than someone else. Like you were saying, Luke, before, I don't think a lot of people will watch like 15 different streamers. They'll tend to go with the ones that they like, the 2 or 3 that they like. And that's their hub, that's their community. I think trying to cram all that into one station, for lack of a better word, is a potentially disastrous challenge for something. This just seems like a prime example of entrepreneurs biting off way more than they can chew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
I was about to move on to my next question. If you want to add one last thing on that point.
Oh no, I'm probably going to tack something on to the end of this that'll be a little fun thought exercise. So go ahead.
Okay.
Cool.
So Cody, you already touched on this, but I wanted to ask: do you think Horn and Kusin are correct that gaming carries the culture shaping force that MTV used to carry? Is that an accurate thing to say?
I think it's definitely gaming is a powerful force. I think it's everywhere. I think if you just look, people always cite like the multi-billion dollar numbers, like how much revenue it brings in. So there's that. But I do just think as a cultural force, especially within a certain generational range, it is that force that music was. I mean, I think movies as a form of entertainment have evolved in terms of how people perceive them, largely because the distribution model has changed and the industry has changed now that Disney owns essentially the majority of the entertainment world in that way. I think gaming is something that has an absolutely massive reach and a massive powerful grasp on a lot of people. I do think it is if you compare it to what MTV was doing, I think it's capturing people in the way that music videos and music was.
Yeah, definitely.
Not like music goes anywhere, but
yeah, look no further than World Cup athletes doing Fortnite dances when they score a goal, and Fortnite being referenced during the NCAA tournament during the single biggest upset in NCAA tournament history when the first 16 seed beat a 1 seed. Fortnite was something that they talked about right after during a post-game interview. And not just in those big ways. I mean, gaming is something. Music is one of those things, like, there are so many genres of music and so many places you can go to connect yourself, and like Larry's taste in music isn't the same as mine, but music is something universal, like that we can talk about and have a conversation around. Gaming is becoming that thing too. There's a bunch of genres, and Cody likes different games than I like and that Larry likes, but at the end of the day we can come together and have conversations around those things. And I think anything like that where you instantly feel a connection to somebody because they're into the most high level version of your hobby, I think you call that culture shaping. So yeah,
it's also just seeped into the cultural firmament. So even people, like, terms and terminology from games has become part of mainstream culture, even if you don't play games. Like, everybody knows what level up means. That wasn't the case 30 years ago. It's just kind of, even if you don't play games, like it's kind of just seeped into how we understand culture at large.
Yeah. So I have some thoughts on MTV in particular. Just sometimes I think underestimate what a force MTV has been until very recently. So the most watched program of the year among teenagers every year was the MTV Video Music Awards. Every single year for decades until just 2 years ago. 2 years ago was the first time it dipped below anything. And so if you wanted, as a youth minister, if you wanted a barometer for where youth culture was at, what your kids were into, like you forced yourself to watch the dumpster fire that was the Video Music Award, or you read someone else's recap if you couldn't stomach it. That was probably more harsh than it needed to be.
You just sounded real old.
I am very old. I couldn't watch anymore after I was forced to see Nicki Minaj perform Anaconda. I was done. No more VMAs for me. Anyway, I am super old. But it was a driver and a shaper of youth culture, and in spite of their mission drift away from music, so many of their shows over the decades have like been a line straight to the minds and hearts of teenagers and what they were thinking about and what they were concerned about and interested in. And and I don't know if gaming is quite there yet, but I do think that it is. It's definitely moving that direction. But the thing that knocked the VMAs out of most watched program of the year is that kids just don't watch things live anymore, and I can just pull my phone out the next day and see all the highlights and see the important stuff. And I think MTV is aware of that, and there's been some restructuring of the things that they do over the last couple of years in response to that. And I don't see the wisdom in being like, okay, there's a void, we can fill this with the gaming. I don't think we're at that point by any means. But they're going to do it. At the end of the day, this thing is coming, whether it's going to be successful or not. So, and we've already touched on this, but to what degree does this interest you? And what kind of content would you watch on a gaming-centric network?
Okay, I want to cut you off here because I want to take this a step further. And I want people in the comments to do this. If you're hanging out in chat, you can do this as well. Let's task ourselves. You have been given what was the seed? What's the seed money for this thing?
17, I think. 17 mil.
17. You've been given $17 million to craft a 24/7 round the clock network around anything gaming related. So we're talking esports, it can be streaming culture, it can be video game news. What would your network look like? What would be like some of the shows? What would be some of the things you'd want to get streaming rights to, like event wise? What would how would you fill 24 hours a day for your broadcast network with $17 million?
Is taking the money and running an option?
Not at all. You have to do it. And this isn't Horizon. And you can take this any direction you want. Either something that you think would be successful, or really just something you would want to you would want to watch personally. Beal for Real says 3-hour-long PvA live in studio with studio band.
Oof.
Yes. All right. So you've seen Wayne's World, I'm sure. Movie Wayne's World.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to so many of these younger folks, these whippersnappers that haven't, but I would totally go straight up, sell out. They redo our theme song. I cut out for a second, didn't I?
No, we got
okay. You guys cut out for me. That was weird. So VENN, just letting you know, we will sell out, or I will. I'll bring my part of this show.
Look, if VENN wants to pay us to do a 30-minute talking head show every weeknight at 7 p.m., hell yeah, we'll do it.
But I do think like gaming news, obviously, and I miss that format, which is weird. I'm not big for watching like internet videos. I'll just read the article, but I would tune in for like every evening at 7 p.m. Here's the gaming news so far, even if it's just once a week. There's a great show that does that already, the PvA Nightly. Every weeknight at 9 p.m.
Yeah, baby.
But the thing that popped into my mind here, something that I would really like to see, and I don't think it's been a possibility until this point in time, but I'd love to see like a gaming history show. I forget the name of the guy. There was a guy who wrote a book about the history of gaming, and it's a really good book. I'll have to look it up, but bring him on and just let him tackle really important touch points in the history of gaming and the impact of specific games. I'd tune in to watch something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the news part is the thing that interests me the most, although I do think it is some... That part is also probably one of the most difficult, considering it's coming into an environment that already has established voices and names that do video. It's not 24/7, and that's the biggest... I honestly hate the 24/7 news cycle. I think it's affected culture, or perhaps infected culture in ways that I don't think are entirely all that great. And I don't know if gaming is an industry that requires a 24/7 news cycle. It's one much like, well, what happens is if you were to take this and run 24/7 news, is you'd end up getting something along the lines of The Hollywood Reporter mixed with what's the fucking trash entertainment channel? Yeah, the one the one that's just all kind of like paparazzi videos.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Is it E? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
You just got to fill time, and so you end up filling time with absolute bullshit.
I think you're right on that, because there are weeks where we struggle to have 3 topics for this show.
I just think it's an industry that I don't think needs to be covered 24/7, which is when you start to fill it with esports content, exclusive streamers creating exclusive content, let's players creating exclusive content, and culture shows like what you're talking about, Larry. History shows, but also I would be interested in seeing kind of like essentially video features. Like there are tons of people, great video essayists who do great pieces and great investigative pieces on their own into like the stories behind games. And so some of that is what I'd love to see, although you can find that now. It's just decentralized, as we've been talking about. And I guess my explanation gets at what I think is the difficulty, which is just that it's all over the place. Like I would only be tuning in for less than half of what I've just mentioned. And this is me pitching what I would be interested in.
Yeah. Well, what I would want, I've given this a lot of thought, guys, because I would just I would love an esports style 24/7 thing. And look, the way that you get around a 24/7 news cycle is you do like ESPN does, where you just talk about the same shit over and over again. You replay this. I used to watch SportsCenter like 4 times a day back when I was a kid, and this was before it was live the entire day. They would record it at 7 in the morning and then just replay that episode until they recorded another one at noon. I would watch that shit 4 times, like if I was homesick from school or something. So, but no, what I would want something very similarly structured to ESPN, where the beginning of the day it was like a recap around the world, because and esports is awesome because it's global, and there's a lot of times where I'm not aware of, like, hey, there's a big Rainbow Six tournament that's happening over in Europe. They're 5 hours ahead, so I'm not getting a chance to watch it live. Like this international like news network that brings me the highlights of all the shit going on in the esports world. And I think something like that would actually be huge for esports, because a lot of esports fandom comes off of just being kind of like brushed up against an esport to be introduced to it, you know? Like I am really into Overwatch League, and because of my fandom on Overwatch League, I brushed up against several other esports that I've since become a pretty big fan of. And so a network like this would introduce more people. So a morning of just highlights, let's get caught up on everything that happened the day before, and then just like give me 30 minute to hour long shows around each specific esport. Like, hey, here's an hour long show where they're just discussing things that are going on in the Overwatch League and you know, Rainbow Six, whatever. And then at night, get the streaming rights to those leagues. And the cool thing is, with it being international, you would have stuff to stream pretty regularly around the clock. It'd be a little easier to fill a 24/7 news cycle. I agree. I don't think it works at all for just general gaming news, because we've gotten that in the past with Kojima, you know, us covering every single meal he ate for 3 months while he shopped for an engine to build his next game on. And that's what it will devolve into. But I really think there is a space for something like this in the esports world that could work.
I totally agree. I think that's probably their best bet. It doesn't seem to be what they're interested in, but it seems to be their best bet.
Talk to me, VENN. They've only got 500 and some followers. I tweeted this link at them, so they'll eventually listen. They've got to.
Bill for Real says, throw up Al 3 nights a week, gaming nightly news show, and honestly, just give me another X-Play like show again.
So X-Play was like a, hey, here's what's coming kind of deal, right?
Yeah, it was heavily preview focused.
Yeah.
I'd watch that. And you know, we're really overlooking the primary focus of what this network should be, and that's bringing back Red versus Blue. Give him a network television home.
And then you sign Conan O'Brien on, and it all of a sudden will legitimize your platform. So
I would give Kojima a 24/7 hour news cycle. He would just be on a live stream 24/7.
That way I can Kojima a show.
Yeah, give him a show.
It'd be the weirdest shit ever.
It would literally just be him, Norman Reedus, and Mads Mikkelsen talking for the entirety of the show every day, all day.
I don't even know if Kojima would talk during it though. I think he'd just listen to them talk and just kind of look on like he's madly in love, because he is madly in love with them.
This is off topic. This is a tangent, but I would have loved to see the initial pitch that he gave to them and if they understood any of it. Or if they're just like, everybody tells me this guy's a genius. I believe them. Let me sign on the dotted line.
Interspersed throughout the day, I'd like to see there was a YouTube channel I used to follow, and I couldn't even tell you who it was, but back in college there was a channel that would do like every week it was the top 10 Halo kills of the week. Get throughout the day, just as a bumper, throw up like the top plays of the week from a variety of games. Just let me see those crazy plays that I'm not going to see anywhere else.
Kotaku has a show like this called Highlight Reel, where it's not all great. Like some of it is like really great plays. Others of it is just like people finding the weirdest shit in games, like glitches or exploits, and they just kind of put it all on one. They do it on a weekly basis. It's pretty great. Something like that. I remember the only thing I ever really loved on ESPN, I'm not a sports guy for the most part, I loved the not top 10 that they would do.
Yeah,
this is obviously become dominated by like just fail videos on YouTube and everything, but I loved that, and so doing something like that, I think as a bumper, it's a great idea. Just
I was on a Halo fails of the week once for using the plasma pistol on a Banshee and losing the game for my team by dropping it on myself. It was great.
Nice.
Bill for real says top 10 Tetris clears.
He also said, honestly, give me a Kojima nightly show where he just plays this music.
Yeah.
Kojima After Dark.
Kid, I'm blanking on his name. Etc. Kid, give him a show.
Yeah,
that's one of their streamers they need to put on there. That guy's show is so cool.
Yeah, check him out. Twitch.tv/etc. Kid. All right, anything else, Larry?
I don't know. As much as I am pessimistic about how this model will work out, I'm excited for the thing itself and for my own personal enjoyment. I intend to enjoy it while it exists. And I hope against hope that it exists for longer than a few weeks.
Well, and I'm like a background noise guy, and lately I've been watching a lot of ESPN, and I'm going to tell you this right now. ESPN sucks. Because honestly, it really is. Like last week, there was a big story around a football player named Antonio Brown, and literally
yes, there was
50 minutes out of the 60 minutes of each hour, they just talked about Antonio. Oh, I'm talking about before even that story that you're thinking of, Cody.
Oh, okay.
This is when he just was like throwing a tantrum and got cut from his team and then signed to the Patriots. Like
when he posted that Instagram video.
I think that was probably a part of it. So
yes.
Yeah, like that news cycle is just trash. But yeah, a network like this where it's just there. Yeah, hell yeah, I'll turn it on and like just leave it on in the background. I don't know how much I'll actively go out of the way, but the good news is, guys, again, they only have 500 some followers right now. We just tweeted a link to our video at them. So VENN, if you really want your shit to take off, hit us up. 30-minute talking head show every single night. We're there. All we ask for is $250,000 each per year. That's it. All right?
Seems reasonable.
Seems reasonable.
I'll quit my job for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right, moving on. Let's talk about E3 2020, guys. Speaking of things that are slowly slipping into obscurity.
The segues have been on point tonight.
There was a leaked slide deck from basically a pitch meeting for the new direction of E3 next year. And this was from GameDaily.biz, written by Mike Futter. The article's titled E3 2020 Pitch Proposes Overhaul with Qtainment, New Floor Plan, Industry Only Day. I encourage people to go through this. There's like a 20, how many slides are in this deck? Like 28, 27. There's like a 27 slide deck that I think is pretty enlightening in terms of understanding not just how the ESA thinks about E3, but how just marketing works and how garbage it is. As somebody who works as a marketing professional. But some key changes that are coming, they want to shift into a consumer-focused event that's going to focus on bringing more influencers and celebrities in and making it kind of appointment entertainment. So probably the most enlightening piece of information in this is a photo that I'm going to try to describe for our audio listeners. So they do a comparison of last year's West Hall of the Los Angeles Convention Center next to a proposed layout of the West Hall for the LA Convention Center. So last year's, this year's 2019's, it's just a bunch of booth space. So there's just a bunch of rectangles that are blocked off with company names representing like, hey, you can go here, play the games, get the merch, talk to representatives from these companies. Whereas
but you smush those corners in, and what do you get?
Some circles, as they're called. You get some circles. So in the 2020 proposal, there's basically going to be 8 stages around the West Hall where they're going to be. Some of them are by appointment only. I think some of them are probably going to be like open air events where as you're standing in line at the booths, you're also going to be experiencing whatever entertainment they've deemed worthy to deliver to their captive audience. So it's going to be all about like, hey, we've got these celebrities that are playing this video game, or hey, we're interviewing these influencers. Like, and so really trying to bring much more of a consumer focus rather than, hey, this is a trade show, B2B idea, retail, kind of industry inside baseball stuff. And they're trying more to migrate towards like a Gamescom kind of feel, like a PAX kind of feel. So that's probably the biggest thing to take from this, is that changing focus. I just want to kind of open it up to you guys. What do you think of that change, and what are some other changes in here that really jumped out to you in terms of what we're going to be moving to in 2020?
Well, obviously the big main stage, I hope, is just Andrew WK.
Party.
I would pay for that.
But no, I think this is a good move. E3 has been, as you said, slipping into obscurity and trying to look more like Gamescom. A good idea. That's more successful. At one point in the article, they talked about, I can't remember if they settled on the idea or not, but they talked about having a day that was just for the media before they opened it up to everybody else.
The Tuesday, right?
Yeah. I think that's important, just for what E3 is. Like, give those people their chance to get in, get their hands on it, and tell us about things before everybody comes flooding in.
And there's a key point of clarity I want to make here real quickly, and then I'll hand it right back off to you. When we're talking about E3 2020, we are not talking about the stage presentations of it. So I think a lot of people hear E3 and they think like, oh, there's Xbox's E3 presentation with Keanu Reeves. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about E3 2020, the show floor event that people go to and see previews of games, get tons of swag, stand in line all day. That's what we're talking about. Go ahead. Yeah. So when we're talking about slipping into obscurity, we understand that there's still a lot of relevance around those shows, but the show floor stuff has been slipping as of recently.
Yeah. So I think the transition is. I lost a thought. So Cody, you talk.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's all right. It's an important distinction for sure.
I mean, I think it's probably their best move to go in this direction, because I don't mean to be flippant about it, but I don't know many media members who are certainly excited to go back to E3 after the fucking dumpster fire that was leaking all their information.
Yeah.
I do think I think in the article, and I've heard other people compare this to moving towards a more Gamescom-y like feel as a consumer show. And I don't know if that's necessarily a bad move for them. I think they're expanding. Didn't they say they're expanding it by 10,000?
Yeah, there's going to be 10,000 more like just general public passes available.
Which, given last year, there'll be 10,000 fewer people interested in attending.
Yeah, I do think in some ways this is a good move. I'm more interested in talking about some of the other things that they're intending to do. And I want to separate when we talk about that the language used and the actual what they're actually doing, because I think the language is marketing. Yeah. It's marketing 101. It's obviously going to come off as pretty cold and calculated. That's kind of the point. But I don't want to drift too far into that conversation before you get to say what you get to say, Larry.
One thing that really interested me was the Q-tainment.
Yeah.
And I actually think that's brilliant. I think back to there's a haunted trail not far from here where it's not a bad trail for the money, but the line is huge, takes hours to get through. But while you're in the line, there are all these guys in costume going around and terrifying you and making it more entertaining than you just standing there. And so anything to improve waiting in line, good move. But also smart marketing wise, like you got a captive audience just stuck in a line forever. Like, use that time, find ways to use that time for sure. I think it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, that was one of the, well, and I guess it's only had a consumer focus side for the last couple of years, but it's like, how did you not think of this prior to? But no, I agree. I think this is the only move that makes sense for E3. I think the more that the middleman of kind of like the old guard media has been taken out in terms of their necessity with distilling information, where companies are communicating far more directly with their consumers with, like Nintendo Direct style, Sony State of Plays, Inside Xbox kind of things, or just releasing and dropping a blog post or a trailer on your YouTube channel. E3's function and purpose of being hey, retailers, check out everything that's coming down the pipeline, has become a little moot because we're seeing so many companies back out of making their big reveals at E3, because at this point it's terrible marketing to reveal things right next to when your competitor is going to reveal their next big thing. So it makes sense to move to a consumer focused side. We're seeing more and more so growing popularity of industry events, not just in gaming, but across all kinds of subcultures where fans get up and get excited about these things. Generating more word of mouth buzz among just regular consumers, I think, is a big thing for companies as well. It's one thing for IGN to go out and say that something's great. It's another thing for Larry to come back and tell me that something's great. I'm going to trust Larry more than I trust IGN just inherently because we're friends. That's the way that new world marketing works. Like there's a social proof that has to be given before making purchases, and that comes from word of mouth from people who you're close to, that you trust. And so having a consumer focused thing where people can go get their hands on it and then go back to their circles and talk it up, I think is a big move for companies as well. I think that's just as, if not more valuable to them as, we're going to get a 10-minute interview with IGN on this soundstage that they have set up, So, and that's not to say that those things aren't going to continue to exist at E3, but having that other arm, I think, is much more benefit than it is disadvantage.
I think, what you're saying in terms of kind of spreading the web of word of mouth is probably the most significant thing, I think, for me, and why I think this is a great move on their part. We saw it with, it's a great way to build hype for companies. We saw it with behind closed doors stuff with Cyberpunk recently. We've seen it over and over again when it's just the industry. But when you get to get it into the hands of a select amount of people, granted thousands of people, but a select amount of people who can then go and spread that to people who spread that to people, that's what you want. I think you're right. It's having that personal connection and being able to know the person who kind of who validates your taste. That is super powerful, especially now when we're all just looking to be validated in our taste.
Yeah, don't criticize anything that I like, please.
No one wants that.
What were some of those other things that jumped out to you, Cody?
You cut out there for a second.
Oh, I said, what were some of those other things that jumped out to you?
So there's mention of the social good.
Yes, that was a very cold, calculated marketing speak part of the presentation. One of those that comes up and you're like, they clearly didn't want anybody outside of this meeting to see this.
But I mean, it is very understandable. So the idea is that they want to take advantage of millennials and Gen Z's social consciousness and kind of start to seed that into the show as well, allowing people to donate to causes when they're doing things, and also integrating that into the streamers as well, so that streamers can come on and stream for causes as well, or participate in terms of causes that they're passionate about. I mean, it is very cold and calculated, but I do think it's especially when like every inch of that show floor is branded. I think it's great to be able to bring in a certain level of social consciousness, even if it is literally just ticking a box on their marketing checklist
for your PR.
Yeah. I see some very interesting opportunities that they could have in that area if they actually commit to it.
The thing I'm most excited about with that portion of it, though, is that there's going to be all these celebrities coming, and I know like 2 or 3 weeks later, I'll be able to find their phone number somewhere on their E3 website.
That is true.
And yeah, even if they only do these good things to look good, at least, hey, they're doing good things they weren't doing before.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are plenty, we've obviously, I mean, with Able Gamers and plenty of organizations out there doing things for good in the gaming community, I think it's an opportunity to get those people in front of an even larger audience. And the celebrity stuff is interesting to me I guess on a different note, just because didn't it say that they're less interested in paying celebrities and more interested in just attracting them naturally? Like they want to be able to attract people who are interested in coming to the show.
It was more about wanting to go through organizations that'll help them line up influencers by saying we'll give you they're tying it to the social good thing by saying we'll give you a platform to talk about your charity or your initiatives. So there's an organic side of it, but there's also this influencer marketing of like, we're going to compensate you in some other way rather than just like stroking a check for you. Yeah.
So I think, I don't know, the social good, on first reading, I rolled my eyes, started to think about it a little bit more. I mean, I think any marketing slide I'm going to roll my eyes at, especially in terms of manipulating people's desire to do good. But ultimately they are still doing good. So I think that's kind of it's an interesting angle for them to approach, and it shows them at least trying to adapt to an audience, a younger audience that will be coming to these shows.
Another marketing speak thing that like is off-putting, but it's just the way things are. In that vein, they talked about basically stocking goodwill for the next time that they angered gamers. And that was funny to me, but that's just working with people in an organization.
Yeah. Another one that jumped out to me, another funny marketing speak thing, was this was from one of the paragraphs in the GameDaily.biz article. It says the lobbying group says it hopes to create, quote, exclusive appointment only activations for select attendees who will create buzz and FOMO, end quote, which is fear of missing out. First of all, exclusive appointment only activations, that's just marketing speak out the ass right there. Like that shit gets said at my firm constantly, like, talking about activations and things like that. So, but just that idea of like, we create these things that are here one moment and gone the next because you want people to fear that they're going to miss something and want to be in attendance. So the fact that we just like lean into that psychology is one of those things, again, we understand exists in the marketing world, but just seems much more cold and calculated when you see it spelled out for you like that. I think of really interesting note throughout this article, though, was the amount that the ESA kind of pushed back against some of these ideas that I think ultimately are a little bit no-brainer, especially when it comes, like they gave pushback on opening up the floor to consumers. They gave pushback on the influencer stuff. They gave pushback on the idea of it being more of a festival and less of like a B2B retail event. And I think that's where they kind of acquiesced with the industry only day. So I feel like the ESA is that old man that's like, and Larry and I both worked in churches, and the last people to agree to anything is the old man in the back who just wants things to be the way it's always been before. But they're important people to bring along with you to get buy-in from. And I think what do you guys take from the ESA's seeming disconnect from what seems like no-brainer decisions with their industry's largest event? Anything to be read into that, or is that just the conservatism of leadership?
I have to imagine. I think that's part of it. I do think it's a sign of an organization truly struggling to come to grips with what the industry is now and how people engage with the industry. The ESA has a recently troubled history, but also broadly troubled history. And I just think it's an organization that has for so long been at the center of one of the industry's biggest events and been at the center of the industry. And I think it doesn't really know what to do with itself. I think any organization like that is inherently kind of dubious of new ideas. Because it's challenging something that has worked for so long, and if it's worked for so long, why can't it continue to work? But I just do think, like you said, so many of these things are no-brainers, and you'd think that in an industry based on constantly looking forward and constantly pushing forward, you'd think the ESA would be a little bit more accepting of some of these things, especially because they've been in the industry. Like influencers are not a new thing. A lot of these things are not new things, but I couldn't speak to it. I mean, these are just kind of inferences and hypotheticals and kind of me projecting what I believe the ESA is, based on their behavior and based on what they've done in the past.
Yeah, I guess I just tend to assume it's an organization that was on top for a long time, in control for a long time, and especially in gaming, influencers are wielding a level of control that I would imagine that someone that was used to being like where games were announced and the voice of the industry, like that's what E3 was at one point. And I imagine it's just really hard to let go of some of that. Or, well, not let go of, it's gone. I guess it's hard to admit that it's gone.
Do we know who the members of the ESA are? Is that public information?
I imagine we can find it, given there's different wings of
an unprotected spreadsheet on a website somewhere.
There's different arms of the ESA, right? Obviously. Like I imagine that, like, if we wanted to see who was a part of like the lobbying side of it, we could probably easily find that kind of information. But I don't know. I've seen lists of like companies that are involved, like publishers that are involved in the ESA, and I imagine that every big publisher at least has some sort of representation within it. Yeah,
and I guess that's the aspect of it. I'm surprised those companies are constantly looking for this stuff. And I try to think use the ESA. I try to think about the ESA as I do the Academy, like the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences that votes on the Oscars every year. But they're just kind of completely different in terms of organization, in terms of makeup. But I just think the members of the ESA it would behoove them to kind of accept these things moving forward, because they're already a lot of these publishers are already thinking about these things on a day-to-day basis and doing a lot of it.
Yeah, I just found it a little interesting, and I think that any of these kind of discussions about change are going to be met with a dialogue. But I thought that the amount that it was pulled out in the article was just kind of fascinating to me, because the ESA saw one of the biggest companies in the world, in their industry with Sony, say, E3's not that important for us this year.
Yeah.
And I think that like that should throw up some red flags and make you say, all right, we got to change some shit. And obviously they are, but the pushback to me was just pretty intriguing. All right. Any other parting thoughts on the future of E3?
They're just holding out for VENN so that we can get back to the era of network television covering the event. So
Back when the video game awards used to be on Spike TV.
yeah,
That was only a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it was.
So, all right. Well, let's move on, guys, to everybody's favorite game that we play at the end of this show. Two Truths and a Gaming Lie. Gaming Edition, the musical, the series edition games. All right. So the way that this game works. So the way that this game works is I have a little known game. This one is actually pretty obscure. Did not sell very many copies at all. And then I will list 3 facts about it. One of them is a lie. You guys must suss out which one is the lie. Onto the scoreboard. With 9 points, leading the pack, with an opportunity to win it today, Codsworth Coddington. Coming in second with 8 points, me. How do I get points? If none of these knuckleheads can figure out which one is the lie, that means I have done my job well, and I get the point. And bringing up the rear with 1 more point than he had up until 2 weeks ago, Larry Hunt with 1 point.
Woo!
So are you guys ready
Come back
for today's
win? Here we go.
You guys ready for this week's game?
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. Obscure title. Little
B.
game.
Final answer.
Grand Theft Auto 5.
Oh,
You guys may have heard of
that
it.
little thing.
I don't know. Here are your 3 facts. Number 1, the word fuck and its derivatives are used 365 times in the game, not counting the soundtrack or random NPC interactions. Number 2,
Sounds right.
one of the cars in the game, the JB700, is based on the Aston Martin DB5, used in a number of James Bond movies. The JB stands for James Bond, and the 700 is for 007.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, not far east of the coast of Sandy Shore, if you dive very far down, 500 feet, you will see a hatch, and a light inside flickers on. If you get close enough, a series of noises can be heard. The noises are Morse code, and it translates to, hey, you never call. How'd you fancy going bowling? This is a reference to the Grand Theft Auto 4 character Roman, Nico's cousin, who constantly rings him throughout the game, asking to go bowling. All right. So we've got the number of times the word fuck is said, 007, car, Aston Martin, and let's go bowling. Larry, let's start with you. Which one do you believe is the lie?
B. James Bond. Final answer.
All right. Codsworth, what do you believe?
I'm gonna go with A.
The
fucks.
The fucks. All right. And winning it all, bringing it home, is Cody Codsworth Coddington, the 4th, Mellowcline, the 8th, the series, the musical. With
Alpha
10
and
points.
Omega.
The word fuck is actually said 1,039 times in the game Grand Theft Auto. The 365 times is actually how many times it's said in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas.
So they've upped their game.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I actually found a YouTube video of a guy who played every single instance of the word in Grand Theft Auto 5.
I knew the James Bond thing was real because I've seen people use that car in the game, and I knew the hatch thing was because that was on the list of Easter eggs.
Oh, shit. See,
I just decided to pick a letter before he said anything because I obviously couldn't trust my gut, and I figured my odds were better.
so this
You
kind of
committed to it though.
this kind of sucks. Not only because I gave up like a 7-point lead at one point, but also because it means next week I have to figure out a brand new game for us to play because we promised we'd play this until we got to
Fresh start.
first person to 10. So I'll come up with a new game before next week's episode. Congratulations, Cody. I don't know what you win. You get
What do
to
I
be
get?
on next week's show.
Yes.
You get to pick anything in the background of Lisa's.
what will you
Give
take?
me your guitar.
All right, it's in the mail.
Give me your Celtics hat.
All right, guys, let's get out of here. Who are you? Where can we find you? What are you going to be tweeting about this week? Larry, let's start with you.
I'm Larry. You can find me on Twitter at Still in Flux, and the Byte app, the rebirth of Vine, recently deleted all of their tweets and retweeted a guy excited about the Byte app. So I believe the Byte app is finally on the way, and that is what I will be tweeting about.
Called TikTok. What's the difference between TikTok and Vine?
I don't know. I never used TikTok out of
We're just a
Byte.
couple boomers. We don't
All
know.
right.
My coffee was 49 cents, and I'm not going somewhere where the coffee's not 49 cents.
All right, Codsmall.
My name is Cody. You can find me on Twitter at ProElectioneer. Probably be tweeting a little bit more about Control once I finish it up. I want to tweet out my final thoughts about the game.
All right, awesome. I'm Luke Croft. You can find me on Twitter at LukePVA. And this week, I'm just going to be leaking all of the telephone numbers of my friends on my contacts list. So,
And to start, Seth Martin.
But this has been PvA Radio. We get together each and every week over here on twitch.tv/PvA Radio at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time to talk about the 3 biggest gaming news stories of the week. We have an in-depth discussion about it. Consider your collaborative audio feature article. And Cody, what do we want people to do with that?
We want them to spam that emote in the chat, and we want them to shout at the EA on Twitter
Yes,
about CAFAs. We want those CAFAs.
that's right.
We also want them to set up a CAFA Twitter account,
Yes,
please.
And to use that to help us sell out to VENN.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. If you can't catch us live, you can watch us the next day on youtube.com/PvA Radio, where we break it out topic by topic, or you can watch the entire episode, or you can listen to us on podcast services everywhere, wherever you're watching us. We greatly appreciate it. We've got a couple people hanging out over here on Twitch in the chat. So, and I have a theory I want to run by you guys on stream. So stick around for the after party lounge after the outro music goes if you're hanging out live with us. But if you're listening to us anywhere else, we appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment, and review. Until next week, we love you and goodbye.
Why, that's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.
Watch your sleep, become that shortwave radio.